Hi, this is George from The Return of the King. In this video I want to talk about the upcoming June 10th eclipse. Here's a picture of the skies from Jerusalem at the time of the eclipse. Now the eclipse is not visible from Jerusalem, it's visible from North America and specifically Washington D.C. we'll see, and that'll be important in a while. You'll understand that. Now the eclipse is right here between the horns of Taurus. Now notice where Venus is. It's in the constellation of Gemini. I'm going to be talking about the movie Ipet Goat 2, and it's produced by Hierophant. Now, in their logo here, Hierophant, you've got the eclipse going on right here, and then the eye in the video moves from here to here. And so, if we look at the constellation of Taurus, and this is from Jerusalem, you'll see that here's the eclipse, and here is a bright star, and there it is. There is Venus. And there's the eclipse in the exact orientation that you see in Hierophant. So I want to talk about the disk. This is very common. The sun between the horns of Taurus. This all goes back to Egypt. If you've watched a lot of my other videos, you understand the rituals performed in Egypt to resurrect the spirit of Osiris, Horus, taking that spirit and putting it into the pharaoh. They're going to be used to place Satan into the Antichrist. And those structures are set up in Washington, D.C. That's why I brought Washington, D.C. up, because Washington, D.C. has been set up by the Freemasons. That's what they want to do. They want to bring this person, the Antichrist, and bring him into power and to rule. And the same structures were set up in Luxor, Egypt, to take that same spirit of Osiris and Horus and instill that into the Pharaoh. And here's just some more little artwork showing about, here's a bull from Egypt, here's a bull, and then we have, see he's got his horns here. It's kind of interesting because this a lot of times can symbolize, this can be like the moon and the sun together. And what I thought was interesting about this particular picture here was that you have there's a bright spot in the tail, and that's basically kind of in the same spot as like we have the eclipse, and then we have Venus over here. So I thought that was interesting, and that's why I wanted to show that picture here. So now let's get to Ipet Goat 2, and this is one of the scenes at the beginning of the movie, and it starts off, here's with Obama, and if you look, you can see the eclipse is right here, and he's got a mole here. He's the only character in the movie. There's a lot of the characters have the eclipse on their cheeks, but he's the only one who has like this mole, which is going to represent Venus, what we saw before. You'll see that's important to the video because he's the only one that has it. Now if we go forward, she has the eclipse here, and she has the eclipse here. Now this movie is totally has a lot of Masonic imagery in it, like the tiled black and white floor. That's totally Masonic. And there's some other stuff in the video here. I'll show you something. This here is kind of like the Antichrist being born, and this is an eye of a snake here. And under the eye, there's this lettering. It's CHAO, and there's an AB over here. And what that comes from, it comes from Freemasonry. And so what he's got written on his eye down here is this Ordo Ab Chaos, and is Latin for order out of chaos or order from disorder. This term was invented by Freemasons and is the actual model of the 33rd degree of Scottish Rite Freemasonry. So this whole movie is about bringing the Antichrist into power. I watched the whole thing in like really super slow motion, and there's just so much there. It's unbelievable. I'm just going to cover a tiny little bit though, because this is like totally awesomely cool what I want to show you here. Now what happens is she drops the apple, and the apple rolls across the floor, and it stops with this letter L and a letter C. And then we've got the apple, and it's going to do something here. And then we have Obama, and remember Obama has the eclipse and then the planet Venus on his cheek, like we saw in the very first slide. So what happens here is this apple is going to split in two, and then out of it, out of the seeds, it's going to intertwine, and it's going to form a lotus flower. Now lotus flowers are important. This is really important to this video. And if we look up what the meaning of a lotus flower is, it goes back to ancient Egypt again. What's important here, though, for this video is that lotuses also symbolize resurrections and new beginnings. The flower emerges in the morning, only to close up at night and disappear back into the water. In the morning, a new blossom emerges and continues the cycle. So it's all about resurrection. Now, Obama, he is standing on a coin. And on this coin you can see that the image on the coin is that of a crown. And so here's a picture of a crown. And if you look at the image, you can see the cross here. And you can see the shape of the crown on here. So what that's telling us that this person is going to be a leader. Obama here is representing the Antichrist. Now, whether or not Obama is the Antichrist, he's very high on my list of possible candidates for that. I don't know if it necessarily means that he is the candidate or that he is the Antichrist, or this person is just symbolically representing that person. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Remember, on our floor, what do we have? We have an L, we have a C, and then we have an apple that splits in two. What do we have over here? We have the constellation Leo, the L. We have the constellation of Cancer here. We have Gemini, which consists of two people. So the apple splits in two, and then we have this Lotus. This is pretty crazy here. And so then what do we have? We have Obama. And Obama, we have the eclipse on his eye. So here's the eclipse right here. And then we've got the little dot, which represents Venus. And remember, Jesus says he is the bright and morning star. Venus represents Christ. But the Antichrist is not against Christ. He's a false Messiah. And so what do we see here in the constellation of Gemini? We see the planet Venus. And so we see this whole thing being interconnected. And this is basically talking about the bringing forth of the Antichrist, resurrecting the spirit of Osiris and Horus, and basically putting Satan into the Antichrist, because that's what it's going to be when the Antichrist appears. Now, again, here's the instruments that are used. There's metaphysical type things that are used to bring that spirit, basically to deify the Pharaoh in Egypt, to become demonically possessed, and to instill or place the spirit of Satan into the Antichrist. This was some of the imagery and stuff that they use. And you have the same thing if you look at the layout of Washington, D.C. The buildings are placed in such an order to instill that spirit of Satan into the Antichrist. Now, if we go to Washington, D.C. on the day of the eclipse, this is what's going to happen. And the eclipse occurs right after sunset. The sun rises at 5:42, and the eclipse reaches its maximum at 5:47. It's not a total eclipse, but it is visible from Washington, D.C. It's interesting that it occurs in the morning, because in the movie Ipet Goat 2, you're going to see that it's a dawning. At the very end of the movie, you see the Antichrist coming out on a boat, and the sun is rising. It's the dawning of a new age. And the sun, you can see the clouds form the shape of a scorpion. And we talked about in some other videos that there was an eclipse. There's two eclipses that occurred in the constellation of Scorpio. And Scorpio is related to the coming of the Antichrist to the tribe of Dan. Now I want to talk a little bit about what Jesus said in the book of Revelation. He calls himself, he says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, saith the Lord, which is, and which was, and which is to come, the Almighty. Now, Alpha and Omega, that is in Greek. In Hebrew, it's the Alph and the Tav. And Hebrew reads from right to left. And so this is the first letter of the alphabet. So this is the Alpha, the Alph, and this is the Tav. And what's really interesting about this character here, the very first one, it's an ox, just like we see in the constellation of Taurus. It's a strong leader, ox. God the Father, the strong leader that guides and directs his family. This is from the Bereshit prophecy, is the end of days prophesied in the first word of the Bible. And so we see the elf, we see that imagery of the strong ox. And then what's really wild, Jesus says he's the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. He's the Alph and the Tav in Hebrew. And so the last letter in Hebrew is Tav. It's the cross. And Jesus Christ came and he died to redeem mankind. And so I think that's like really totally cool. Again, here the Alpha and the Omega. And then so when you go and you look at the constellation of Taurus, you can see this imagery. It's believed that it was like derived from this, from some secular sources. They make this connection between Taurus. And it's pretty obvious here when you take the two horns and you run through the stars. It goes like this. You end up with this particular shape. And so Taurus, which is Christ, he calls himself the Alpha and the Omega, the Alph and the Tav in Hebrew. He's coming back to take back his kingdom. Eclipses, they're judgments on the world. He's going to use the Antichrist and the false prophet to bring salvation to Israel, judgment to the world. Just like he used Joseph and Pharaoh to save the nation of Israel. He used Joseph, and Pharaoh was basically a demon-possessed leader, and God used that leader to bring salvation to Israel, and he's going to do the same thing again here during the tribulation. And so now this is what the heavens look like on 6/7. This is 3 days before the eclipse is going to occur here in the constellation of Taurus. If you've watched all my other videos, I talk about when the moon is in the constellation of Aries. This is being the sign of the rapture of the church. When I kind of came across this concept by reading Joseph Zeiss's book, he talked about Aries being about the rapture. The concept of the moon being the church comes from Joseph and his dream of the was 11 or 12 stars, 11 stars bowing down to him, and then the sun and the moon bowing down to him, and the moon represents the church from that dream. And so I asked God, is there some kind of is this connected to the rapture of the church, this moon being in Aries? And that night I had a dream of a wedding in heaven, and so that was a confirmation that this is. And at that time, I thought when the moon is in Aries, that would represent the rapture of the church. And then like weeks or months later, because it takes 7 days to get to Cancer. Cancer represents heaven. In the Noah story, Noah flood, he gets a 7-day warning before. So there's a 7-day warning. So in my last couple of videos, I was talking about Cancer. When the moon is in Cancer, we get a warning 7 days ahead of time. And when the moon is in Cancer, that's when the rapture occurs. That's one possibility. Another possibility is if this is when the Antichrist is revealed during this period of time. Remember, it's also the time all this alien disclosure stuff is supposed to be going on in mid-June here too. So if this, let's say the Antichrist is revealed, we should be out of here before that time. So this very well could be the possible rapture of the church, and this would be on 6/7. Again, here's the day of the eclipse on 6/10 between the horns. You notice here, I should have brought this up. Let's go back one click. It's interesting here because when the moon is in Aries, Venus is in the constellation of the wedding. And so this character here represents Christ, and this character represents the church. And Venus, again, Jesus is the bright morning star. And so in the constellation of Gemini, we've got the bright morning star coming to get his bride. So we see that here. We'll see that again. Here's the eclipse. And then on the 14th, the 13th to the 14th would be the next time. Again, we've got the bright morning star in the constellation of Gemini too. This is Christ, and this is the church here represented by these two characters. And then heaven is Cancer represents heaven. And so there's a lot of imagery here pointing to the rapture of the church occurring this period of time. Now, it may not be until fall. I mean, I think we could go as long as the Feast of Trumpets, but from everything that we're seeing here, it really appears that the rapture is going to be in the next couple of months. I want to talk about this particular slide here. Back in, we had all this convergence and stuff that was going on, and it all converged around May 17th, 18th, and the 19th. And this all has to do with Pentecost. It's determined by TorahCalendar.com. Now, Pentecost comes to a close with the rapture of the church. The rapture does not have to occur on the day of Pentecost. When we had all those convergences that we saw on May 17th and 18th, it really looked like this was the day. It was a year ago I did a video on Pentecost, and in that video, I wasn't really thinking that the rapture would occur in Pentecost because there just wasn't that much convergence. I thought it was probably going to occur really close to the Feast of Trumpets. This year, because of all of the convergence here, this was a really high watch day, and a lot of us really I thought this was probably going to be the day. But there are other pieces to the puzzle, and that's this annular solar eclipse that we just learned about here. So the rapture could occur, to me, anytime between now and the Feast of Trumpets. But right now, I would say the month of June is a very, very high watch period, especially the time period we just looked at here. And so if you remember here, we had back in on 12/14, we had a total solar eclipse in the constellation of Scorpio. The Antichrist is believed to come from the tribe of Dan. The constellation associated with the tribe of Dan is the constellation Scorpio. And then in Ipet Goat 2, at the very end of the movie, when the Antichrist is being birthed, he's in a boat and he's headed towards the sunrise. You can see a scorpion in the sky. And then we had on 5/26, this just occurred, we had a total lunar eclipse on the third day of the 13th month in the Jewish calendar. That kind of ties back to Pope Francis, the false prophet, who on the Gregorian calendar came to power in 3/13/2013. So you see that kind of connection there. Again, this lunar eclipse occurred also in the constellation of Scorpio. So we have that same connection to the tribe of Dan and the coming of the Antichrist. And now we just had this annular solar eclipse between the horns of Taurus, and we saw in the Ipet Goat 2 movie. There's somehow this is connected to his arrival. I don't know if it's necessarily on that day. It could be, or it's sometime between now and I would say the Feast of Trumpets is when he's going to show up. We'll get raptured first, and then he's going to show up in the scene. So we've got probably another 3 months, but of possible time period. And then we'd have to kind of reevaluate things after that. But the next couple of weeks look super interesting. I just want to all thank you for watching. Super exciting time. Jesus Christ is coming. Don't lose hope if this comes and goes here, because everything is pointing to it. Everything that's happening in the heavens, on the earth, is pointing to his soon return to pick up his bride. And then we're going to see we'll be in heaven during the 7-year tribulation. We'll be celebrating. And I hope to all see you very, very soon. Kind of on that journey up into the heavens here, which is coming soon. So again, thank you all for watching. God bless, and hope to see you soon.